Welcome to the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. I'm your host, Jacob Cooper, best-selling author of Life After Breath and the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. For those of you who are new to my podcast and platform, please consider checking out this video and many others, and consider hitting that subscribe button as well as bell notification icon to be a part of an amazing and growing community. Today's guest in the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder is Diane Calderon. Diane is an author, an evidential medium, and she's also a shining light parent, which we'll certainly elaborate and get into during the course of our conversation. So without further ado, we bring on Diane Calderon as my honored guest in the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. Diane Calderon, it's a true pleasure having you here as my honored and featured guest in the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. I've been following your work for quite some time, and I'm so inspired to share your story to my viewership. So thank you for coming here as my honored guest on the channel.
Thank you very much, Jacob Cooper. I was tickled to death when you said, would you like to be on my program? Because I have a story to tell, and I think it's an important one that many people need to hear. And the more people that listen to this story, the more hope and healing, I think, is going on in the world. So any way I can help is great. And thank you for being one of the vehicles to get that story out there.
Oh, Diane, we are really looking forward to hearing your story. I know from my channel's perspective, it's called the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder, which was originated in Genesis in the Bible. But the genesis of my particular channel started with Elizabeth Boisson, who I know you're familiar with. That was my first ever interview. And it really was an intention of my channel to bring in empathy, to talk about some of those difficult subjects, but to really allow one's example, one story to shed light on another. And your story falls in lockstep with all things that my channel is about. And so for my viewers who haven't heard your personal story, without me giving too much away, because I know you could share it much better than I did, although I did love watching your incredible interviews with Suzanne Giesemann, a colleague of ours, and as well as looking through your book, which is behind you, which we'll definitely talk more about. But take us through, step by step, your journey, because the person sitting in front of me has gone through so much more to get to this chair to this day. That's helping out so many people. And I'm so proud and inspired by your path. And I know it hasn't just touched me, it's touched so many others. And but yeah, just take us through this journey, because it's beautiful to me in many ways.
Thank you, Jacob. Those are kind words. The journey began 10 and a half years ago. It was early 2014, January. And I was dealing with a pretty challenging situation in my life. I had retired from government service a few years before. My husband was also retired, and he had begun to enter the stages of Lewy body dementia, a very challenging and difficult disease. And I was the full-time caregiver. We live in an area in northern Arizona that's rural, didn't have a lot of friends or family nearby. So a lot of the caregiving was on my back, and it was not easy. He was a brilliant man who was just falling apart in front of me. I had a son who lived in Phoenix. He was working on a home that we had bought as an investment, renovating it. Phoenix is a couple of hours away from where I live. And my son, Matthew, would come and visit when he had time to help me with my duties. It was challenging to just go to the store with my husband, Sal, because he would wander off and get lost and sometimes create a little problem. So Matthew would come up and help me with Sal. So we're in January 2014. I'm facing the challenge of my husband's decline, and I knew that he would be passing at some point. That's the way Lewy body goes. My son was just beginning to get focused on his life. Mind you, he's in his mid-30s. He'd spent a lot of time just doing a lot of different things, but focused a lot on construction. And he had decided to be a building contractor. So he had to take licensing exams and gather paperwork and what have you. So he was getting ready to do that. And I was a little excited because I could help him with that. I could do the administrative work if he was going to be a contractor. He was not a paper person. So it gave me something to look forward to in life, knowing that my husband would be, pass away at some point. At least there would be a purpose in my life moving forward. So January 2014, as we entered the new year, was heartbreaking in some ways, but there was also some hope for my future. Things changed very quickly that month. A little bit later in the month, my son was killed in a hit and run accident. He was walking his dog to the dog park in the little neighborhood where he lived, and just happened to be crossing the street with the dog one night when a car ran into him and kept going. Got the call the next day from the Phoenix detectives that, hey, are you the mother of Matthew Helmick? And I'm like, yeah. And I get the news, and it was tragic. It was just so tragic. So I'm in the middle of caring for my husband, and now I've lost my son. This is the only child I had. So it was a big hit, and grief just came at me in waves. It was just so astounding at how much was happening in just one short little phone call. So that brings you up to that point. Matthew's death, though, led me on this journey and brought me to where I am today. I did not see this coming, but there it was. If you wish, I'll go into some details as to what started this path and what helped me get through the grief and what led me to groups like Helping Parents Heal and people like Suzanne Giesman, Suzanne Wilson, and others who have helped me in my journey and have led me to where I am today. So today I am a certified medium. I am a Reiki Master. I'm an author, and I'm the administrative assistant for Suzanne Wilson, the Carefree Medium.
Wow. I always reference this quote in a lot of my interviews, but particularly when it comes to trauma, grief, in your case, traumatic grief, with everything that was going on, combined with complicated grief, because as you mentioned, your husband was, as you said, transitioning, and then this happened with your son. So I couldn't imagine being able to juggle all of these tragedies coming your way. But it seems like there was a story that you walked into, but obviously with the book behind you, you were able to not be defined by a story. This book allowed you to define that particular story. And for my viewers, I absolutely love the title of your book, although it can be certainly compelling, thought-provocative, and in your case, puzzling as to how that title came about with everything you went through. So but I'm just wondering for my viewers, could you tell us a little bit about your amazing book, which, had an endorsement, like we said before, by Suzanne Giesman. I know you mentioned Suzanne Wilson wrote the foreword to it, but tell us a little bit about the book, the title, and what's in store for viewers and readers.
Okay. The book came about because my son, who had passed over, kept nudging me from the other side to write down the story. He wanted people to know that love lives forever, that life continues. There really is no death. He wanted his friends to know to live life every day and enjoy it.
Can I just stop for 1 second?
Yeah.
As you're saying this, the sun is coming through, right, shining through in my place. It was cloudy, and as you're saying this and talking about the light, no coincidences. So I am so sorry for interrupting you, but for my viewers, rewatch this, because as she was talking, I see a ray of light coming through. Wow. No Beautiful. Other explanation, as Suzanne Giesman says. Yeah.
No
Continue.
Other. No other. It's just amazing what he can continue to do. So I know he's around. He's been bothering me a lot lately. So I know he's excited about this interview. All right. So the title of the book came about because the day that he died in the evening. But earlier in that day, he had called me and we had a great chat. And he told me, I'm going to be up tomorrow, Mom, to help you. I was in a situation where my brother, who was in the area, was going through colon cancer surgery. And I needed Matthew to be here to watch Sal so I could take my brother down to Phoenix to the hospital for his surgery. So Matt was coming up the next day, and then the following day I was going to deal with my brother. But on that conversation, the last time I got to talk to my son, we had a good laugh about a couple of things that had happened here. And then he opened the door to, hey, Mom, I'm applying for a part-time job at a brewing company and restaurant, and I need your advice. What should I put on my job application? And, my typical is, well, you put down that you're a good hard worker, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's this job application that I found days after he had passed. I had to go down to his house in Phoenix, go through his papers, sort through things. I find this job application. He had not turned it in the day he filled it out. It was sitting there for me to find. On the job application, where it says, what are your qualifications for this job? Mind you, it's for a part-time brewer, worker at a restaurant. He wrote, living and loving life all day, every day.
Wow.
Those words it just blew me away. This I knew was the last thing my son had written, because he was not much of a writer, but he had filled out that application that day. And those were the last words he ever wrote down, living and loving life all day, every day.
Wow.
So like I said, Matthew nudged me over time to write this book. He led me to the right people to help me out. In writing the book, I got stuck on a title, and I must have put down 100 different titles for the book. Well, this one sounds good. No, this one sounds terrible. On and on and on. Medium Joe Higgins helped me out towards finishing the book and getting it, in great form and getting it ready to publish. And I had told him, I don't know what I'm going to title it. He called me the next day and he said, oh, the answer is in the book. I read everything through last night and it brought me to tears. And I'm like, what? And he said, the part where you said Matt wrote, living and loving life all day, every day. That's the title of your book. So there it is. Matthew wrote the title of the book from a job application. And the book is trying to express that exact sentiment that, we have life. Let's live it. Let's love it. Because while we're here, it's short. Enjoy it. Enjoy it while you can. So that's where the title came from.
Beautiful. And I just know your example really could shed a lot of light on, anyone who's gone through tragedy or grief. The fact that you have been there in the abyss of the human experiences, it can still have that mantra, could still have that part as an aspect of your life. I know could be so inspiring and pivotal to so many who have gone through the worst of circumstances on a human level.
That's the hope, that people who come across this book, who are able to take the time to read it and truly understand the story and what I experienced and how I moved through the grief. And it's not a movement where grief goes away. Grief will never go away. It's something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. And I think all of us do. I get a little upset when people say, oh, get over it already, or why are you still grieving? Hey, that's my son, or that's my husband, or that's my loved one. And yes, I'm going to carry that grief because they are a part of me. And this is now a part of my life. But I also understand that life is transitory. We're not here forever in this physical form. But my son showed me, and what really carried me through is that life continues. He showed up immediately upon passing over. I didn't know it at the time, but he came to me and let me know that, hey, I'm fine, Mom. I'm right here and I'll always be here. And that helped carry me through the early stages of grief. It helps carry me through today. He keeps showing up. He sends signs similar to the light that just shined in your home from the sun, Jacob. My son continues to do this. A couple of weeks ago, I'm sitting in the house. I'm focusing on something, and I hear a voice in my head. It was my son. He says, Mom, go outside. There's a rainbow. Now, we hadn't had any rain here for a while, though it had been cloudy, and it had rained in the area, just not in my neighborhood. So I thought, yeah, sure, Matt. But I go outside, and sure enough, to the east, there was a rainbow. So he likes to do that to me. It's just amazing how he pops in with these little signs continuously.
Wow. So from what you're describing is really congruent with a lot of the afterlife research, which really points to the evidential perspective that belief has a role, or rather, in your case, a knowing has a role on your grief journey. But you just highlighted two very important areas that, yes, allow yourself to be raw, human, and to grieve, but also it is also possible at the same time to have a higher spiritual connection to a loved one, and that may be able to accelerate or help you possibly on your grief journey,
Mhm.
as well as being careful with who and whom you discuss your vulnerabilities to. Could you share a little bit for your perspective? Because I know I've been experiencing this, myself. And sometimes when people think of grief, they just think of a loss of a loved one, but grief could be an ending of anything. And I had an unfortunate falling out, with a best friend over 30 years, and I was grieving, and people came up to me and said, "Oh, he's just a friend. Get over it. I thought you said you were grieving. I thought someone died." So the point that I'm trying to get at is the public doesn't seem to have a great deal of education on grief, what to
Mhm.
say, what not to say. From your experience, what did you learn and what do you feel people should better understand? Because I think that's so significant to have more education on grief. And obviously, from your firsthand experience, I think you could really shed a lot of light on this, particular area.
Grief is a very difficult issue for any of us to deal with. And I know myself, I went through a lot of time in my life not having to have a lot of grief. It took a long
Mhm.
time before anyone close to me had passed over. And, the first one that was close was my mother. It's been over 30 years. But when she crossed over, she had been suffering a lot. Her health had declined tremendously. And I didn't have a lot of grief. It was like, gosh, I'm sure she's better off now where she is than what she was going through here. Grief really didn't strike me until the death of my son.
Mhm.
I did have a friend who had lost a daughter to a very tragic incident a few years before my son had died. She
Mhm.
had called me and I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to comfort her. We were close to the family, but I didn't know the right words. And I was very cautious to say something that would sound not helpful. Now my son had died. She's the first person I called in my friend circle for help, and she knew what to say. And she helped me
Mhm.
through those early days of dealing with the tragedy and making the arrangements because she'd already been there, done that.
Mhm.
Years later, another close friend lost a son, similar type of tragedy. When I saw her at a memorial shortly after things got organized, there were no words. It was just looking at each other and our eyes connected. And there was this understanding that we knew what loss was. It was in that gaze, and we just hugged and we cried. There were no words. So I'd come a long way in dealing with helping my friends in their grief, in their losses of their children because of what I had experienced with my son. And I have found that sometimes the best way to help someone through grief is to have no words at all, or a simple "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, can I hug you, can I hold you, can I cry with you?" Because I have had friends now, we're older, we're losing spouses, we're losing others in our lives, and that's what I do. I don't have any other words, but I understand. Let me hold you, let me help you through this. So I don't know, that's kind of my advice. Just, you don't sometimes have to say much of anything, just I'm there for you, and show your love to them. That's important.
You've found that to be most helpful personally and with others that you've crossed paths with. And it seems that what you're describing is presence, mindfulness, just being one with the person of not where you're at, but where they're at, entering their world and leaving your own. Because I think for people, we want people to progress. We want people to move forward. We don't like our friends hurting, but at the same time, we have to meet people where they are at. And I think that's beautifully said. And sometimes less is more, as you said. And people come from good intentions. They'll say, oh, they're in a better place, but I'm not, and they'll say, eventually you'll get over it. There's no guarantee. And with loss, we are never the same, particularly as pivotal as Matthew's in many ways. I'm wondering from your perspective, and this is something that I personally grapple with, and I know many viewers of mine have this too, but from walking this path, is there a purpose to pain, or is it something just total trivial with no potential purpose behind it? From going through, all that you've gone through, and for you subjectively, if so, like what has been that degree of purpose, or rather meaning, that you've had throughout all of this?
Boy, that's a pretty deep question there, Jacob.
We go deep here. We're climbing the ladder.
Okay. I mean, we could talk about this all afternoon, but in a short summary, I guess, what is the purpose of pain and grief and loss in a human life? Mm-hmm. What does it mean to be human? I believe that we come here into this physical existence to experience whatever life offers, that we have some idea before we come in what our life's plan could be. It doesn't mean it's set in stone. There's no predestination. There's just this concept that we come in and we want to experience so many different aspects of life. And we're going to work our way through whatever paths we choose, good, bad, otherwise. We make our decisions, we move forward. And in almost every life of anyone who goes through adulthood, there's going to be loss. There's going to be tragedy. There's going to be heavy grief. This is part of our human condition. This is why we are here. When we are back in our spiritual home, when we transfer over, cross the veil, and return to our true home where we are one, where we are nothing but love, we understand why we went through that path in life. Over on the other side, there is no grief. There's understanding. They know why we're going through this, and it's a perfect place. But here on this earth, we really don't know what we're doing. We come in, our minds kind of go blank. We don't know our true home, and we have to work our way through the humanness and the grief and the loss, and also the joy and the beauty of life in order to fully understand what this physical world is about, how we can grow from it as a soul, and what we can do to help others move forward in this life. So I think grief is just a part of being human, and we chose to come down and be those humans. And so that grief is going to hit us at different points. How we deal with it kind of depends on our process that has brought us to that point. Some people are very religious and they deal with grief in a very religious way, depending on an outlook. Some are a little more spiritual. Some don't believe in anything. Everybody deals with grief in their own personal way. It's their own personal story that they had to go through in this life. And I'll tell you, when we get over on the other side, we can look back, we do those reviews, and we see why certain things may have happened, why we had to experience things. There's no right or wrong way. There's no right way to do grief. There's no wrong way to do grief. We just look back and say, oh, I went through that. Wow, look at what I've learned. Look at what I've accomplished. Look what I can share with everybody here in the spirit world on my own journey. And we can sit and chat about it if we want. So I think, grief is just a human condition, and we are human, and we're going to go through it.
Wow. So it seems from what you're saying in your personal standpoint, and this is very hard for most people, but grief and loss could be the most disordered circumstance of our life, where we feel the foundation that we're standing on is yanked and we don't know what to do ourselves. In order of this, or purpose of this, or reason behind this is a lasting in our mind. But from your perspective, it's possible within disorder to find order, a new understanding of order. That yes, as crazy as all this looks on the surface, there was a pre-birth planning, there was an intention behind all things in my life, particularly the pivotal ones. And it seems like for your perspective, that knowing has helped you, within your own journey, to find more beauty, sense of purpose, call to action, which is very hard. So that's challenging for a lot of people. But how would one maybe get through that, because they're going through their emotional stuff? Do they just bypass that and all of a sudden go to workshops, or should they allow themselves to feel what they feel and go through those progressions?
I think the journey is going to be different for every single person.
Mm-hmm.
If you need to just allow yourself to feel what you feel and you're not quite ready to do that step towards workshops or towards connecting with groups that are going to help you, that's fine. That's okay. Perhaps one day you will reach that step. I know initially in my grieving, I didn't have a lot of time to grieve because I was caregiving for my husband. I couldn't, lock myself up in my room and cry every day because I had a man that needed care. He needed to be taken care of. So I didn't have a lot of time to grieve, but there are other people who do need that time. You need to process whatever feels right to you.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully at some point you begin to emerge from that grief. Just look at life itself. You mentioned a little bit of, chaos. I know the Bible talks about in the beginning, it was chaotic, right? It was chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And from chaos became form, became life, became who we are. And so the chaos creates the life. The chaos creates the conditions in which we start to reassemble our world. And I think grief does tear us down, but we have the strength inside to find the way to rebuild our world. And it's not an easy process. Some people maybe can do it quicker, some people not so quickly. But there's a way for everybody to work forward to find whatever help they might need when the time is right, to reach out and ask for help when the time is right, and to be led to the people that are the most helpful to you. Try not to get involved in people that are going to say, why are you still grieving? You try to find the people that understand what you're going through. For instance, Helping Parents Heal has been a great organization for people who have lost their children, because those parents in that group understand that life continues, that our kids are around, and they are there to listen, to reach out. They have caring listeners. They have all kinds of workshops and online activities where someone who is beginning to move out of the grief can move forward. There's a lot of organizations out there. If you need that, not everybody needs it. Look at our history of humanity. There haven't been these kinds of groups for centuries and centuries. Somehow, though, people have processed the grief and they move forward and they continue on with their life. They still carry the love with them. They still carry some of that grief, but everybody finds a way. This is the human condition. We find a way to keep going. So whatever works for each person is great. If you can be led to an organization that is helpful and beneficial, hopeful, helpful, and healing, wonderful, wonderful. And if you don't need that, that's good too. Everybody has their own path. I lucked into the right path. I lucked into the groups that would help me, and I'm glad I did. And now I reach out and I try to help others move through their own grief and their own loss.
Beautiful, Diane. And I know you mentioned Helping Parents Heal, an organization which we're both closely affiliated with. I'll be presenting over there in August, and hopefully you'll be too, at I believe, the Grand Sheridan. But as a therapist, and certainly a spiritual seeker, I understand the relationship of labels and beliefs on our self-perception. Within the mental health field, if a parent does lose a child, the terminology is a bereaved parent, a grieving parent. Helping Parents Heal has another terminology that you carry. Could you share that term? And for you, I'm just wondering, just out of curiosity, what that term can do for a parent in terms of how they see themselves, and maybe a pathologized way to how Helping Parents Heal, labels or identifies your positionality within your loss.
Helping Parents Heal has a term for the parents who have gone through the loss and who have understood that their children are fine, that their children are over on the other side. And that term is shining light parent. What that means to me, and perhaps others have their own perspective, as we all do on things. To me, a shining light parent is someone who has basically seen the light being the love that is inside each and every one of us. The light is our energy. The light is our life force, and it never dies. Our children carry their light. They never die. We carry our own light. We never die. Spiritually, our souls continue forever and ever and ever. We are lights in this great, big, beautiful universe. So a shining light parent would be, to me, someone who has tapped into that light. They understand that their children are light, and they are willing to shine out and spread that light to others who are in need. We live a lot of our lives in a little bit of a darkness. We don't understand the full beauty of our world. And when we begin to open up and realize it's all about love, that is the core of our essence. That is our light. And we see that love in ourselves. We see that love in our children. We see that love in our families. We spread that love to everybody else. So to me, a shining light parent is someone who has discovered the love and is spreading it out, trying to help other people.
So through discovering that light within, the particular darkness, that's a transformative avenue of grief, is what you're stating. And I'm certain for a lot of other people who are affiliated with helping parents heal, the possibility that, hey, I went through this to find something, to go through something, and I have a capacity or superpower to shine light in others, that my life doesn't have to just be morose, that I can live while I live. And it is possible to, live a beautiful life in my own way, some days better than others. But that possibility from connecting to the essence of love will propel my life forward and connect me deeper to those that I may be missing on a human level.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And, understand that on the spiritual plane, in that world, it is all love. And when we come here, we're missing out on some of that. We're missing out on our home, because that love is a little bit intangible. It's hard to reach. So we go through our lives and we begin to tap into it. And as we experience things, hopefully we're learning that love is all there is. And as we grow in that love, I think it makes us better human beings. It makes this experience a little bit easier to deal with, makes it easier to some degree to deal with some of the tragedies and some of the craziness that goes on in our world. We're just love. That's all we are. And if we could all tap into that, if we could all spread that love in the world, maybe we wouldn't have all the problems that are going on. But each of us has to carry that light inside and then try to spread it out to others in our own small way. Every light that lights a little brighter in another person's world is a big, big step ahead for humanity and for us.
Yeah. And also, I thought about this myself. Unless you're missing some mirror neurons which are in the brain, which rolls itself to developing empathy and compassion to others, pain and loss is a unifying factor amongst, it's a universal concept. And I think if we could align ourselves with pain and loss instead of taking that out on each other, and leading with empathy, leading with compassion. Wow. Imagine the global healing that we could have instead of continuing to have hurt people, unifying with the hurt that we all go through. We all feel pain. We all feel loss, unless obviously we're neurologically compromised and we don't have those faculties to be able to do that. But yeah, that would be my hope too. It's just awareness of grief and pain, and having people to understand the common denominators that does come with, the human experiences of feeling hurt, feeling loss, and being compassionate for each other.
Absolutely. It reminds me of some studies I had read in which they've looked at the rise in people's connectivity when certain events occur throughout the world. And they have some way of measuring, for instance, when something tragic happens, like 9/11, there was a rise in people feeling connected, right? There was this empathy that was spread out. A tragedy brought us together. When there is some horrendous event, a death, we come together. There are also studies in which they've tested if we do group meditations, what will happen. And so when they do group meditations at a certain point in time, they see a change in consciousness, a change in energy in the world. So I think we are so interconnected that we have the empathy we feel when there is a tragedy on a group level. And if we focus on a positive and we try to raise our consciousness and we meditate and we think about great things, we also raise the consciousness of the earth on a group level. If more of us could tune in on the positive, maybe it would make a change in our world in the long run. But it is interesting how interconnected we all are. We're all basically one mind, one thought, one divine consciousness that are connected. If we just tap into that, we would know what to do in life. But we're working through it, right?
Yeah. And obviously, HPH, or Helping Parents Heal, is global. It's gone throughout the world. And we see from their model as to what can happen when you gather. I mean, they have hundreds of thousands of people gathering together within the concept of grief, within the concept of empathy, understanding. And I'm sure, the amount of healing on their scale is profound. And imagine if that microcosm could be applied to the macrocosm. That model of ruling by empathy, compassion, being our brothers and sisters keepers instead of attacking one another. But yeah, we could certainly talk about world peace and what is the why and the how. Back to your book, though, I know a fellow, and probably botching this. I go to Arizona all the time, lived in Sedona for a short period. I know that's right by you, but a fellow Arizonan, Allison Dubois, who endorsed my book behind me, and she's been on, the podcast, vice versa. I'm paraphrasing. I'm not using, Allison's, firsthand work, but she have in, I think one of her books alludes to this, that we are their heaven. The lives that we live are, much like we look to the other side as heaven, we live through them and they look at us as their heaven. And it seems like your book, really is congruent with Allison's statement that loved ones really want us to live for them and to enjoy life as much as we can. And they are immersed in what we do, much like we are interested in what they do. But could you speak to a little bit of the significance of the spirituality with practicality of your title and why that's important from the eyes of another, from the eyes of a loved one on the other side, and what they may be wanting us to do when we are, having our human, raw emotions and experiences, to missing them, and longing for them and grieving them?
Well, in my opinion, the people on the other side, those who have moved on and the ones that are really close to us, they keep an eye on what we're doing in our daily lives, and they want the best for us. From their perspective, I think they understand why we went through what we went through. My son Matthew has an understanding as to why he had to leave when he did and why I had to go through what I went through, and is very excited that I have come as far along as I have. I know this because I have had the experience of readings with mediums, with practicing mediums in my own development, in which he has popped in with little bits and pieces of information like, hey, Mom, I saw you the other day and, you look sad. Come on, cheer up. Or, Mom, I'm so excited about what you're doing. Or, Mom, oh, isn't that great that you're going on a trip? I have felt him around me, him and my husband, when I have taken trips. Last year, I took a trip to Egypt, and it had always been something we had wanted to do. We were very fascinated in ancient history. And I got to take the trip to Egypt. I felt them around. They popped in sometimes unexpectedly. But when I went to the Sphinx and I touched it, I was just overwhelmed with their presence. I mean, I started crying because they were right there with me. So I know that the spirit people are excited for us when we do things. They want us to live and love life all day, every day. They understand when we have a hard time. And I think they get sad for us if we, get into those modes where I'll hear a song and I'll get teary-eyed, or I'll come across a photo and I'll have these memories that just make me feel sad. They feel that, but their point of view on the other side is live your life, enjoy it. We understand when it's tough, but we're there for you. We're watching you, and we just love it when you're having a good time. I had heard somewhere that the loved ones kind of live life through our eyes. And when you think about it, it's like, Well, what I am seeing, basically what I am doing, is a way for them to experience the human life through me. So they get
Mm,
to enjoy. They got to enjoy that trip to Egypt. They enjoy, if I'm eating a great food, or my son would say, "Oh, that's a great beer, Mom. I thought you liked hops." I think they're living through me in many ways. I'm not possessed by them, but I think that the loved ones are watching out for me. They want me to do well. They're nudging me to do things for myself and to take care of myself and others. And I think it's true with everybody. I've done some medium readings where I have felt the presence of the spirit loved ones coming in
mm,
for the sitters, and hearing some of the stories of, "Oh, that was so neat how you
mhm,
had that family reunion," or, "Oh, Mom, I remember, you went in my room and you cried when you saw, my t-shirt sitting there still." They experience life through our eyes. And so if we can make them feel happier by us feeling happier, I think it's a great thing. But it's also okay if we cry a little bit. They'll feel you, and they're
mhm.
around you, and they're giving you hugs. And my husband likes to kind of tap on my head when I'm feeling a little down. So I think that's pretty awesome.
Who knows? Maybe he's trying to awaken your crown chakra too. Maybe, I don't know if he was metaphysical in this lifetime, but I'm finding when I connect to loved ones, they're like, man, all that, what that you were saying, I understand what you're saying now. And it feels so weird to have loved ones now understand what I said, who, my grandfather just came in a reading and he said, I was an empath. And I'm like, Grandpa, you saying the word empath? Like, but it's just cool to see like now they're on to the stuff that we're on to, and we're all in unison. Where at times, we could be at different levels of understanding, but on the other side, there's a lot more clarity, and they're speaking our lingo there now, and it's weird, but it's pretty cool too to see how they're all caught up to us.
It is really cool. And my husband, you mentioned, I don't know if he was metaphysical. He really was. I
Mm,
didn't pay a lot of attention in all the years I was married to him, but
yeah.
he always had an interest in metaphysical things, and he read a lot of books, and he could tell me stuff that I would go, "Yeah, how does he know that?" But he was a counselor. He worked as a social worker. He was
Oh, wow.
very intuitive in his work. It was just amazing how much he knew about people,
Mhm,
where I was a little bit dense.
mm,
Now I respect all that he was. I look back and I'm like, "Oh, I wish I'd known a little more, paid a little more attention. We could have had some really great conversations about some of the things he knew about life and death and the great beyond." But I didn't pay a lot of attention during our lives. Now I'm on a different perspective, and I know he's feeding me information. He's leading me to the right books, um, to the right people. My son is incredible at that, nudging me towards people. I mean, my son led me to Suzanne Giesemann, the book
wow.
Wolf's Message. I saw the cover one day, a year after my son died, and the cover of the book reminded me of my son's death, because there's a
Mm,
tree. And when my son got hit by a car, his body landed at a tree at a park. And I'm like, "Well, what is this?" Read the book, and that just opened up my world. Later, he led me to Suzanne Wilson. He had a very instrumental role that he played connecting me with Suzanne Wilson, so that I then became her part-time assistant, her client services manager. She's become my mentor, and she's the one who nudged me and encouraged me to develop my abilities, and took me to the point of becoming a certified medium. So this was all my son's doing from the other side. He's living his life through me in some ways, but I think my son was more advanced than I was when he crossed over. And he
wow.
is trying to bring me up to speed with him. And I know my husband was far more advanced than me. I couldn't understand him
Wow.
all the time, but they're both remarkable spirits over there, and they're just excited that I'm talking about them right now. I can feel it.
You make a great point. Yeah, it's not always like that one way on the human level where we're different than them. They could be, more accelerated. Now they're kind of laughing at us or just like very happy that now we get it. So yes, that's a beautiful realization. Yes, we've had both Suzanne's on the channel. Love them both. I even have a shirt that I sent Suzanne Giesman that had a picture of a wolf with like lightning in the background and trees that I would wear all the time. And I'm like, Wolf's Message, you know. But that was a very profound book. I loved it too, and I love Suzanne Wilson, and you're connected to all the right people, certainly. Now, one of my final questions is, I think within religion, within life, oftentimes we focused on the last moments, and how they went. It almost becomes like, one great forensic autopsy, and a trauma that's constantly, stated of how they went, which is understandable. But I'm just curious in terms of Matthew for viewers. What was the meaning of Matthew's life for viewers who are listening? And, what was his essence? And for parents who might have lost a loved one in a traumatic fashion, such as yourself, what's the value in seeing that person for how they lived rather than the greater emphasis at a certain point of how they died?
Oh, very interesting question. Regarding Matthew, he was one of those kids that was no trouble as a young one. He was pretty good little kid. He was pretty honest. One time he told us a story that, I won a race at school. And we're like, we're so proud of you. And then he started crying like, I didn't really, I just wanted to say that. I'm sorry. He was always so honest. As he got older and got into high school and a little bit later, he had some friends. He got into some trouble in his early years, kind of the type that you'd want to tear your hair out sometimes. Like, what is going on with you, kid? But he always had a kind heart. He had friends everywhere. This guy grew up helping people left and right. He never was concerned about money or having a big career or status. He just loved to be around people. He did a lot of different jobs. Everything he tackled, he did really well at. He just didn't settle into anything. So he was one of those outgoing, friendly people. When he passed, I had a huge outpouring of folks from all over. I couldn't believe how many people he had touched. We didn't do, a funeral as much as we did a celebration of life. And there were two of them, one in the local area and one down in Phoenix. People from all over were coming in. I had bikers, and I had, the cholos from the barrios, and I had just the friends that had worked with him, gone to school with him, had river rafted with him. I mean, there were people from all walks of life, all ages, with stories about Matthew and how he had stepped up and helped them, or he had a great laugh, or how he always had a good time. And he was a lot of fun. But Matthew was just an incredible person. I learned a lot more about him after he died than I actually had realized before, because there were so many parts to Matthew and so many different groups that he interacted with that I wasn't really aware of. He didn't brag about himself. So he was a really kind-hearted person. I think post-death, Matthew is still caring. He came through in a reading, one of the first ones I had, because I couldn't figure out, how were you in the road that you got hit by a car? You're an intelligent person. You shouldn't have been in danger. But I got my answers through the medium reading from Matt, which were remarkable. The angels were there. They said, it's time to go. And he went. So that, really helped me. But in the reading, he had said that part of the reason that he left early is to help his friends, to continue helping his friends, but from the other side. And I know he has done that. I hear from his friends even today with a little story about, I heard from Maddie, or, oh my God, this showed up. So I know Matthew is still there. The book has been making its way through the circles. I often send his friends the book. I don't have them buy it. If I hear from them, I'll send them the book. And then when they write back, they're like, oh my God, I remember Matt. I miss him so much. Oh, I feel him. So his story continues to roll with his friends. He's still helping them from the other side. He's just that kind of guy.
Yeah. And I think you're doing a great service to his life by not just saying, hey, he's gone, that's it. No, you made sure, I'm sure in your own way, to honor his life, to say, no, this was a kid who really lived, who people loved. And I don't want, his story to stop. And I want him to be in his mind, in my mind, in my heart. And I want to share it with the world to really understand that this wasn't a death. This was a life. This was a beautiful life in many ways, as you said. And we want people to really know and to be inspired by the light of I don't know if you called him Matt or Matthew at times, but Matthew. And so that's a beautiful position to be on. My final question is, before we let you go, and we'd love to have you come on, before we get into where we could, find you, your books, stuff like that, Diane, is just out of curiosity, do you do any practices to live your best life? Like, for viewers, watching, like, obviously I'm sure there's subjectivity to this, but is there something that you found that allows people, to maybe like a practice that they can do that maybe they're not from A to Z, from pain to finding beauty, but they're somewhere maybe a little bit, moved in a direction of progress from, through a practice. If that's gratitude, if that's meditation, if that's nature, like what have you personally done that has allowed you to find this beauty, amongst a lot of obviously the darkness with your husband and your son?
The practice that has become part of my daily life starts with waking up in the morning and expressing gratitude. And I'm grateful for so much. I'm grateful for life. I'm grateful for pretty good health, for my dog, for my home. My husband built this home for me. He took good care of me. I go through my little litany of, thank you for this, thank you for that. I thank my angels. I also do a short meditation. And for those listening, if you're interested, I'll put in a plug. Suzanne Wilson has a YouTube channel, and there is a meditation there called The Daily Peace. It's a short meditation, but it is beautiful. I have it tattooed on my memory. I do the little daily peace meditation every day. That helps me kind of get ready for the day. Gets me into a pretty good mood to move forward with whatever it is I do. So that is basically my daily start to a day. I let the day then flow whichever way it goes. And there are days where I find that I am in a position to help people. Sometimes I have someone reach out to me through Suzanne's work and now through my book with questions, or, they need some insights, or they're going through grief. And I love it when I get that kind of person reaching out, because I think I have a perspective that I can share with them and maybe help them move forward in their day or in their life. So I enjoy that tremendously. And then I enjoy when I hear back from people who've read the book. So that has helped me move forward. But, just going back, I start the morning in gratitude. I do a little daily peace meditation. I take time through the day. If things get a little stressful or the world is looking a little gloomy, I try to read something that is encouraging. I have, several books around me that I can pick up and read a passage. I get on Facebook. There's some really inspiring people on Facebook that post some really nice stuff. So I'll read that just to kind of perk myself up, and I might share some of that. So that's pretty much what I do. I just want to keep moving forward. I know my day will come when I get to cross over, and I do look forward to that. I just hope it's an easy transition. But until then, I've got a lot of work to do. I've got a lot of people to meet and hopefully help and inspire if I can.
Wow, you certainly do, Diane. And it seems like you just absolutely love connecting with others and just hearing their perspectives. And obviously all of your descriptives will be on this, YouTube, on my YouTube, on this YouTube interview. But for those who are interested in, purchasing your book, or, reaching out to you with their own personal questions, is there a best way to find, all things Diane Calderon, or just to access you, or do we have to go through a lot of different individuals to do that?
I'm pretty accessible. I have a website. It's my name, DianeCalderon.com. If you go to the website, there's a lot of information there, and there's links to the book. There's links to other interviews. I started a little blog. I haven't got very far on it, but, I'm trying to get a little more savvy with social media and get a little more information out there. But there is information there. The book, just to show you the cover, it's on Amazon. Pretty easy to find.
Beautiful.
It's nice. We have a blue feather to represent a bluebird, because that was an early sign Matthew gave me. I didn't know he had passed, and bluebirds are showing up in my morning jaunt to the road to get the paper, and I couldn't believe it. It's like, why are there bluebirds? There's never bluebirds. But then it made sense later that he had come in with these bluebirds as a sign. So we wanted to carry that theme on the cover of the book. So it is available on Amazon.com, or just go to my website, DianeCalderon.com, for more information and links to my email. And you can contact me by email, or I'm always happy to chat and interact. Thank you.
Yeah. And an ideal reader, I'm sure, is someone who, might have experienced loss and is looking maybe to really be inspired by your personal stories and to really, see more, but I think to be inspired by your stories, certainly. Before we go, and I'm really interested in learning about your second book and bringing you on, obviously, when that comes in. We've had wonderful banter and dialogue, and you've really been able to inspire me, and I'm certain so many of my viewers. Is there any last, thing that's coming to your mind for what we call just the message of the week here on the channel, or something that's intuitively coming to you? And if that doesn't happen, we could certainly include that in, other follow-up conversations to have. But I'm just, out of curiosity, any last messages or final words for now that are coming to you?
Okay, so you mentioned the book. I'm just going to put a plug in real quick. I am working on a second book called Finding the Medium Within, and it's more of the story of how I became a certified medium, because in writing book number one, I had put a lot of stories in there about mediums and what was coming through, and it became too much for one book. So I'm shifting it to a second one because I think people are interested in those stories. How does mediumship work, and what's coming in, and how do you connect? So that's what I'm working on. But as far as an inspiration for right now, I would just say that, as Matthew would say, just live life. Just enjoy life. Don't let the politics, don't let the social media, don't let the world get you down. Don't let the person in your life who's kind of a, Debbie Downer get to you. Just understand that you are love, that your people, whoever they are, if they're in this physical world or they're in the spiritual world, are all love, and we are all connected. So go into your heart, say a prayer of peace to each and every one of them. Be grateful for everything in your life, and live as you're supposed to, as a human being going through all these crazy experiences, good, bad, and otherwise, and just keep focused. You're going to go home at some point, and it'll be fine. And you'll look back and say, wow, that life was crazy, or that was a hard one, or wow, I had a great time. And who knows, maybe you want to come back and do it again. But meanwhile, live this life. Don't be so worried about what's coming ahead. Just look forward to the rest of your life. Take steps to enjoy it when you can, and just be human. That's who we are.
Wise words. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Diane. Beautiful conversation. And as we say, once you recognize there's no death, there's only life, and we have to live while we live. So thank you for that. Diane Calderon, thank you for being my guest here on the Wisdom Jacob's Ladder.
Thank you very much, Jacob. I appreciate it so much, and I love the work you're doing, and you are living the best life. So keep going, my man.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, that was a powerfully moving, inspiring, and invigorating conversation with Diane. We were able to really touch upon the afterlife, grief, her own personal journey, mediumship, and many, many more psychological and metaphysical topics. And so I love Diane. I love her compassion, her empathy, her call to action. This is a great dialogue, and I know many of you share my same sentiments. So thank you all for tuning in to this wonderful conversation, and we'll see you here on the Wisdom Jacob's Ladder channel next week. Thank you for tuning in.